She pretends to be dead to see her family's reaction, but ends up discovering something unforgivable. Mana was a woman who lived for others. She would get up before sunrise, sew by lamplight, and carry in her chest a faith greater than any pain. But one day, when she realized that her own family no longer saw her, that their looks passed through her like cold walls, she made a radical decision to fake her own death. She wanted to hear the truth no one would dare say while she was alive, to find out who would cry, who would miss her, who would remember the nights of medicine and the mornings of porridge. But in the silence of the little back room, Mana discovered a truth she had never imagined, not even in her worst nightmares. A betrayal so deep it would make her die in a way no word could ever describe. Get ready to enter the soul of this woman, to feel every heavy silence, every unspoken word, every invisible dagger that cuts deeper than death. And that's where our story begins. Osei came home dragging his slippers, like someone returning from a long journey, but he didn't find the smell of spices simmering on the stove, nor the soft sound of the radio whispering old songs. He found only a thick, heavy silence, like smoke stuck to the ceiling. When Ama, the faithful friend, said in a low voice, "She's gone," he didn't ask how, didn't ask for an explanation, didn't scream, didn't rush to see her face one last time. He just lowered his eyes, turned his back, and went into the bedroom, locking the door with a sharp click that echoed through the whole house. On the other side of the door, the sound of a bottle being opened was heard. It was an expensive drink, saved for a special day. That sound, the seal breaking, the liquid hitting the glass, struck Mana's soul like a slap. Hidden in the little back room, she heard it all. Osei didn't pray, didn't whisper her name, didn't call the children to hold hands round the bed as people of faith do. He simply drank, stretching his neck, head thrown back, as if finally freed from an old burden. In that long gulp, Mina heard everything words would never have the courage to confess. The children arrived soon after, each in a hurried step, bringing no flowers, no candles, no incense to honor the dead. They came in without looking each other in the eye, exchanged a quick nod, dropped their sandals in the corner like guests arriving at a party. The eldest son Kojo walked right past the mother covered with a white sheet, didn't stop, didn't bow his head, just went straight to the hallway and started scrolling on his phone. The daughter, Essie, glanced quickly, as if seeing a rag thrown out to dry, and kept rummaging in her purse for a lipstick. There, lying down and pretending not to breathe, Mana felt a stab deeper than any labor pain she had ever endured. The sheet smelled of cheap soap, and its rough texture stuck to her sweat-soaked face. She clenched her teeth to avoid sobbing, because she knew any sound would break the theater and bring even greater shame. The grandson, still small, wasn't there. That absence hurt the least, because at least he wouldn't witness that scene. In the kitchen, the clinking of cutlery began. Osei was serving himself a big plate of rice with fish, the same dish Mana used to make on Sundays. But at that moment, the smell wasn't a family memory anymore. It was just food, an obligation to fill the belly before thinking about what to do with the belongings left by the deceased. Mana heard the muffled voices, the restrained laughter, as if mourning was just a disguise to avoid the neighbor's judgment. It was fake mourning, worn only to dodge gossip, not to honor the one who had given so much. Her body, covered like a rag without an owner, was left in the room. No one lit a candle, no one recited a psalm, no one came to fix the corner of the sheet. It stayed there, motionless, like an old piece of furniture that no longer matches the decor. Mana remembered every night she scrubbed the floor with hot water and ash soap, the cloths she hung at dawn, the smell of soap on her children before bed. She remembered kneeling at the foot of the bed to ask for blessings before a trip. How she patched clothes piece by piece so no one would feel ashamed at school. But now, all that history seemed to have evaporated, dissolved into the damp walls. In the distance, a sad song played from a neighbor's radio. It was an old song, talking about longing, about a mother who leaves too soon, about children who become orphans of love even with a full house. The melody crept into the little room like a cold blade. Mana felt her chest tighten, her blood slowed down. It was then that she understood that, to them, she wasn't a soul, not a root, not a story. She was just the woman who swept the floor, served the plates, stitched silence. Night fell slowly, the sky filling with timid stars. But inside the house, no one lit a candle, no one called the neighbors to pray, No one murmured prayers to guide. Her soul, Issei, kept drinking. Kojo went out to talk to someone at the gate. Essie stayed on the couch, feet on the table, scrolling through her phone as if waiting for a funny message. Mina heard everything. Each laugh felt like a hammer blow on her own coffin. Old films played in her mind. The day she met Osei at the market, when he was a strong young man with a wide smile and sweet words. The night they cried together because they couldn't pay for the first child's doctor. The mornings when she went to sell vegetables on the roadside under the scorching sun, just to bring home enough for notebooks. With each memory, the present silence grew crueler, colder, deeper. No one asked if she had suffered, if she had been afraid. No one shared good stories to remember the mother she had been, the wife who had endured. The silence was so dense that Mina felt it could be cut with the bread knife. Outside, a few curious neighbors approached the gate, but no one dared to enter. Maybe they feared the truth. Maybe they sensed the stench of ingratitude in the air. It was late at night when Osei left the bedroom and passed by the corpse without even a glance. He went to the kitchen, poured himself another drink, and went back to his room. The door shut again. The latch sounded like a sentence. Kojo had already gone to sleep in the back room. Essie also went to bed after sending her last messages. Only the crickets outside remained, and the distant sound of a dog barking at the corner. Under the lonely sheet, Mina understood that the heaviest silence wasn't the one in the house, but the one that lives in the heart of those who don't know how to love, and they're unable to move. She realized she had truly been dead to them long before faking her departure. That night would be long as a lifetime of sacrifice that no one ever knew how to thank for. And even without visible tears, her eyes wept inside. Her chest burned, her bones felt heavy. Each breath was a whisper from someone who begs for justice but already knows the answer will never come from those who shared her roof. The first heavy silence was the cruelest, because in it, Mina heard not only the absence of love but also the confirmation that, to those who once called her mother, wife, pillar, she was just a body to be forgotten. And so the night dragged on. As long as a morning no one truly wore. The sun hadn't shown its face yet when Mina heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. Osei came out of the bedroom, still reeking of sour alcohol on his shirt. He dragged his feet, as if he owed nothing to the world, as if he had already buried the last drop of his humanity. The daughter Essie appeared right after, carelessly fixing her hair, her eyes marked by sleepless nights, or, perhaps, by a soul that no longer remembered a mother's affection. They met on the porch. The morning wind carried a faint smell of ashes and wet leaves, as if the day itself also wanted to wash away the filth from that house. But the air there was heavy, dense, hard to breathe. Essie spoke first, without hesitation, like someone talking about a broken object. "When are we going to split the house and the jewelry?" she asked, without blinking, without lowering her head, not even pretending to be sad. Issei rested his hand on the wooden railing, looked at the dull horizon, like someone staring at an empty field. Then, he let out a long sigh, full of disdain, and replied, "I've waited long enough. That woman only got in my way." At that moment, the ground seemed to vanish beneath Mina's fragile body. Inside the little room, she put her hand on her face, squeezed her eyes shut to hold back the tears. The white sheet, still covering part of her body, almost fell off, trembling like a banana leaf in strong wind. But she held on. It wasn't the time to show she was alive. It wasn't the time to let the pain screaming inside her chest escape. Outside, Essie gave a low laugh, almost a growl. The sound entered Mina's ears like hot iron on skin. "I've waited long enough." She repeated her father's phrase in her mind like a cursed mantra. She remembered her daughter's first steps, the days she held her hand so she wouldn't fall in the muddy yard. She remembered the nights she stayed up, sitting at the edge of the bed, watching each feverish breath. Everything felt so distant, now, so irrelevant to that woman who was now plotting to divide the inheritance before the final goodbye. Issei, still staring at nothing, continued. She didn't know how to live. All she knew was to take care of others, forget about herself. "I was too patient. Now, I just want peace. I want to live the way I always wanted." Essie nodded in agreement. "We deserve it," she said, in a dry voice, like someone talking about a plate of food. In the little room, Mina felt a sharp pain in her neck, a sting running down her spine, as if each word tore off a piece of her past. It was as if her entire life had been a long soap opera no one watched to the end. In the silence that followed, a rooster crowed in the distance, reminding them that the world outside kept going, indifferent to the tragedies unraveling inside that house. Essie turned to her father, pulled a small notebook from her pocket, and started writing something down. "We need to sort this out quickly. If we sell fast, I can invest in my husband's store," she said, almost cheerful. Arce nodded, approving. "Yes, yes, the sooner, the better. I don't want anything that reminds me of her anymore. Not these cloths, not those old photos on the wall. I want it all gone." It was there, in the middle of what should have been a sacred conversation, that Maina realized love, when not nurtured, turns to dust. What was once a home becomes a market. What was sacrifice becomes a joke. What was blood and tears turns into numbers. In the little room, her heart beat so hard it felt like it would rip the seams of her chest. She remembered the prayers, the knees bruised on the cold floor, the dawns spent awake taking care of the children. She remembered the parties she prepared with such care, the special dates that only she seemed to remember. In the background, the sound of a car driving down the street brought back the scent of life outside, a life Maina never had time to live, because she was always too busy loving those who didn't know how to receive it. The sheet was damp with cold sweat from her face. Her hands trembled, but still held on to courage, because even at that moment, she wanted to hear everything. She needed to hear everything, every last word, every last wound. When Essie finished writing down the amounts she expected to get from selling the house, she turned to her father and said, "I never really liked this place. Mum made us stay here, with that smell of oil, soap, food. I want a bigger, modern space." Essie agreed, clicking his tongue. She was stuck in the past. A woman who doesn't know how to evolve gets left behind. At least, I was patient. But now, it's over. Maina bit her lip so hard it almost bled. That phrase echoed in her head. A woman who doesn't know how to evolve gets left behind. She, who had evolved 1,000 times in silence, who had become root, trunk, branch, and leaf, who had bent to the wind, to drought, to storms, just to protect her children. And now, she heard she had been left behind. On the porch, they continued, talking about possible buyers, about renovations, about who would keep what. There was no "she was good", no "she made me laugh", no "she taught me to be strong". Only numbers, plans, and empty promises. When they finished, Essie went inside to make coffee. Arce stayed sitting, looking at the sky that was already beginning to lighten. Maybe he thought about the freedom to come, the new life he dreamed of living. In the little room, Maina felt that the true death was that one. Hearing her daughter talk about the house as merchandise, her husband referring to her as an obstacle. At that moment, Maina died once again. Not the death of the body, but of the spirit, of love. And even so, something inside her resisted. Because the truth, even when it rips the skin, is also a seed. And Maina, in silence, was already starting to plant the courage that would soon bloom when the sun truly rose, lighting up every piece of the lie they carried in their chests. The sky was still pale when Ose stepped out again, now wearing a different shirt, clean, ironed, as if he were going to meet someone important. The strong smell of soap mixed with the leftover alcohol from the night before, but he didn't seem to care. He walked with purpose, chin up, as if carrying in his chest a victory no one else could contest. From the little room, Maina noticed the movement by the creak of the front door. Arce looked from side to side, making sure no neighbors were around to hear what they shouldn't. He walked to the gate, his firm steps cutting through the packed dirt in the yard. There, he paused for a moment, holding something in his pocket. The morning silence was interrupted by a faint meow from a cat on the wall. Like a warning, a quiet lament. Shortly after, a young woman appeared, wearing a tight skirt and a light blouse, hair neatly done, bright red lipstick. She approached quickly, glancing over her shoulder, anxious, as if carrying a heavy secret in her arms. Arce opened the gate with a quick, almost nervous move, and pulled her inside, but not too far, just into the shadow of the porch. Standing there, face to face, he held her hand tightly. Maina, peeking through a crack in the little room, could hardly believe what she saw. His fingers intertwined with hers like someone clinging to an old promise. He reached into his pocket, took out a small metal key, and handed it to her, with a smile Maina hadn't seen in years. Now we're free, he said, his voice low but filled with restrained euphoria. All this will be yours, the house, the land, the money. You won't have to live hidden anymore. The woman smiled, revealing white, perfectly aligned teeth. Her eyes sparkled with ambition, not love. She looked at the key as if it were buried. Treasure ran her hand over it gently, almost as if caressing a newborn child. I waited so long, ESA, she replied, in a tone that mixed desire and urgency. You promised it would be quick. I'm tired of being the hidden woman, tired of being a secret. Arce cupped her face in his hands, pulled her closer, and whispered, It's over now. The old woman is gone. We'll start from zero, just like we dreamed. In the little room, Maina held her breath. The sheet almost slipped from her hands. Her chest felt like a bonfire burning in a strong wind. That wasn't just a physical betrayal. It was the dismantling of an entire life built with sweat and faith. Arce wasn't just trading wives, he was erasing history, tearing up memories, spitting on the table where she had so often served him with devotion. The young woman ran her hand down Arce's arm, pulled him closer, rested her head on his shoulder, as if nestling into a victory. Tomorrow, we'll take down those old photos from the walls, she said. I want to hang our portraits, our memories here. I want this house to breathe our love. Our love, Arce repeated, with a wide smile Maina hadn't seen since their wedding day. It was the smile of a man who felt no guilt, who no longer remembered the altar, who no longer heard the midnight psalms. Quietly, Maina felt her body tremble. Every word was a thorn driven into her flesh. She remembered the birthdays when she decorated the living room with simple flowers, the cakes she baked with carefully rationed flour, the days she sold cassava by the roadside to buy cheap perfume, just to please Arce. Now, all of it was dust. He never cared, never kept it. The raw, brutal truth was there, on the porch, in those passionate looks and promises of a future she would no longer be part of. The woman glanced around, afraid someone might hear, and asked, And the children, won't they find it strange? Won't they fight for what's theirs? Arce let out a short, dry laugh. They want to sell everything. They're on my side. To them, it doesn't matter. They're already planning trips, business deals. There'll be no fight, no drama. At that moment, the ground vanished beneath Maina's feet. Not only was her husband betraying her, but the children were also ready to negotiate her memory. There were no bonds, no roots. There was only a silent battlefield where everyone carried a hidden knife, in their words. Arce hugged the woman tightly, like sealing a pact. He kissed her forehead and said, You're the new owner of all this. Trust me, I waited too long to live the life I wanted. And there, on that porch, with the dew still glistening on the leaves, Maina died for the third time. Not the death of the body, but of the soul. The dream of being remembered died. The dream of being the pillar died. The dream of being loved died. All that was left was the body, trapped under the sheet, the head full of prayers, the heart heavy. As a millstone dot in the background, a rooster crowed again, announcing the new day. But for Maina, the sun no longer shone. The world had become dark, cold, silent. Yet, within that darkness, she began to feel a different flame being born. A flame not of revenge, but of liberation. Because in that moment, she understood. She had never been loved, never been seen, never been honored. And when the truth arrives raw, it hurts. But it also frees. Maina held the rosary tightly, closed her eyes, and, even without meaning to, a prayer slipped from her cracked lips. She didn't ask for Arce to suffer, nor for the mistress to be punished. She asked only that God give her strength to stand when everything came crashing down. Because now, more than ever, she knew there was nothing left to lose. And maybe, deep down, that was exactly where the freedom she had never dared to dream of truly began. When the sun had already started to warm the roof tiles, Kojo came out of the back room with lazy steps. He was the eldest son, the one to whom Maina had given the best of her strength, the first to be cradled in her arms, the first to hear her lullabies since he was little. Kojo carried a fragility only a mother could notice. He was the one who got sick easily, who cried out of fear of thunder, who needed double the care. Maina remembered well the nights she sat on the floor, holding his feverish body, fanning him with an improvised fan, while quietly praying to God not to take him. That morning, Kojo seemed like a different man. He ran his hand through his hair, as if getting ready for a party, not for mourning. He went to the kitchen, got a glass of water, and soon after was on the phone. pacing back and forth in the living room. He didn't look once at his mother's body. Not a glance of gratitude, not a single tear held back. His silence was sharper than any hateful word. In the little room, Maina listened to every word, as if they were knife blows. Kojo spoke loudly, without ceremony, without fear of being heard. "Can I sell my share of the land already? I want to travel before the end of the year," he said, in an almost cheerful tone, like someone talking about an unexpected gift. On the other end of the line, a laugh could be heard, a male voice encouraging him. "Do it soon, Kojo. Enjoy life, don't just sit there looking like a sad widower." Kojo laughed, a light laugh, without weight, without past. "I've wasted too much time," he continued. "The old woman just held everything back, never let us live how we wanted. Now I can invest, travel, breathe." In the little room, Maina closed her eyes. She remembered when Kojo cried because he didn't want to go to school without new shoes. She worked 3 straight weeks, sewing for others, washing neighbors' clothes, saving every coin. When she finally managed, she handed him the pair of shoes and saw, for the first time, that wide smile on his face. The same smile that now returned, but for such a cruel reason. Kojo walked around, anxious. "If I sell my part quickly, I can buy a car. I could even start that business I always wanted. I'm not going to miss this chance." On the other end of the line, his friend encouraged him, excited. "It's going to be your year, Kojo. You deserve it. Don't look back. Don't look back." That phrase echoed in Maina's head. Don't look back meant not remembering who held his hand during fevers, who knelt in silence asking for his healing, who shared the last spoon of porridge. Don't look back meant killing his mother before even burying her. Kojo hung up, sat on the couch, and started calculating. He tapped on his phone, wrote down numbers, made plans. No tears, no heavy sighs, nothing. It was as if Maina were just some old woman, with no ties, no roots. That moment felt like watching her son rip out her heart and sell it to the first bidder. Maina trembled. She didn't know if it was from sadness or anger. Maybe it was both, a pain that rose through her legs and burned in her chest. She remembered when Kojo came back from school crying because they teased him for wearing a patched shirt. She stayed up all night sewing so he'd have a new shirt the next day. She remembered the tight hug he gave her when he passed his final exam. Now, all of that was dead. The eldest son, who was once her pride, now spoke of her as if she were a burden, an obstacle blocking his path. To Kojo, his mother wasn't a living story. She was a barrier, a hindrance to his future. From the bedroom, Ase appeared at the door. He looked at Kojo, nodded approvingly. No words were needed. The deal was sealed in silence. The two men of that house were united not by pain, but by greed. Kojo stood up and said, "Dad, I'll go out later to talk to a broker. I want to list it right away. If it sells well, I can start my new life in another city." Ase smiled. That smile Maina knew well. It was the smile of someone who thinks they've won, who fools everyone, even themselves. The smile of someone who thinks freedom means breaking ties, forgetting stories, turning their back on the person who built every brick of that house. In the little room, Maina clutched the rosary to her chest. She felt the beads graze her sweaty skin, as if each one were a thorn, reminding her that faith also hurts. Every prayer seemed to get lost in the air, yet she kept going. She kept going because her silence wasn't cowardice. It was resistance. It was the strength of someone who carries the world on her back, and, even when betrayed, doesn't forget to thank for every breath. Outside, Kojo left, slamming the door hard. The sound echoed through the hallways, shook the walls, woke the ghosts of the memories Maina held. When she heard the door, her heart faltered for a moment. It was the final sound of a farewell that had started long before that morning. In the silence that followed, Mana realized that Kojo hadn't just given up on her. He had never really been by her side. The boy, who was once fragile and dependent, had become a cold, hard man, blinded by his hunger to possess. There was no room for love in a bank account. There was no room for memories in a sale contract. There, in the suffocating little room, Maina understood that even though she had never let them lack bread or affection, she was alone. And in that raw loneliness, true love revealed itself in the emptiness. Because sometimes, it's in the coldest silence that we hear the real sound of souls. And in that sound, Maina heard the truth she had always feared. To Kojo, she was no longer a mother. She was just a door to be closed. and closed in a hurry. As the morning advanced, the house began to fill with sounds that had nothing to do with mourning. There were restrained laughs, hurried footsteps, low voices trembling more with excitement than with grief. In this coming and going, Miana heard the bedroom door slam open. It was Ajua, her daughter-in-law, Kojo's wife, who entered the room where Maina's body lay covered by the white sheet. Ajua had always been a woman with a loud laugh, firm steps, and eyes that scanned everything as if appraising the value of each object. From the start, Maina had welcomed her with an open heart. She remembered the times Ajua came home tired, her legs swollen, and she would massage them with shea butter, whispering prayers for God to bless that union. She remembered the meals she prepared just for her, the beautiful fabric she saved to sew a dress when she heard about the pregnancy. But none of that seemed to have taken root in a DJO in the bedroom. Ajua began opening the wardrobe. She ran, her hands over Maina's clothes, as if picking fruit at the market, shoved the drawers roughly, pulled out the boxes from under the bed. From time to time, she let out a laugh that echoed through the halls. "Look at this, everyone," she said, laughing into her phone camera. "Looks like an old village grandma's clothes. Such rags." In the little room, Miana felt her blood freeze. The sheet covering her seemed to weigh tons. Each word from Ajua was a whip. But Ajua wasn't content just to look. She began trying on the dresses. She twirled in front of the mirror, striking poses, showing everything to her friends. On a video call, "Look, look, now I'm the queen of the house," she screamed, holding up an old necklace that Maina had cherished so dearly. That necklace had been a gift from Maina's mother, passed down through generations. It was more than jewelry. It was a root, a story, a silent prayer. Ajua put it around her neck and laughed out loud. "Now this has a real owner. The old hag won't get in the way anymore," she said, adjusting the necklace on her chest. On the other end of the call, her friends laughed, clapped, made jokes. Mayuna bit her fist to keep from screaming. The salt of her tears burned her eyes, but she held on. There, in the dark, she remembered the nights she stayed up waiting for Ajua to return from outings, worried, praying she'd get home safe. She remembered when Ajua cried after being humiliated by her own mother, and Maina opened her arms, gave her shelter, gave her a home, gave her a name. Now, Ajua seemed like a child playing with dolls. She threw fabrics on the floor, rummaged through perfumes, opened little boxes of keepsakes as if they were trash. "This is worthless, all old-fashioned, all tacky," she said, kicking aside a pair of sandals that Mana had saved since her wedding. Ajua paused for a moment in front of an old photograph. It was a young Mana next to Osei at their first harvest festival. In the photo, she smiled, her eyes full of hope. Ojo held the photo with disgust, analyzed it, curled her lip. "Such a boring old woman. I don't know how they put up with her for so long," she murmured. Then she tossed the photo on the bed carelessly, as if it were a dirty piece of paper. In the little room, Maina whispered prayers. She asked God to hold her heart, to not let her soul break completely. Between one whisper and another, she remembered her mother's words. "Those who don't know how to be grateful lose even what they have." But there, facing raw ingratitude, Maina saw that Ajo had already lost everything before she even gained anything. She had lost her soul, her honor, her memory. Ajo continued her silent party in the room. She tried on necklaces, bracelets, long dresses. Each piece was an excuse for more laughter, more jokes, more cruel comments. When she found a box of old letters, the ones Maina had kept like tiny treasures, she started reading them out loud, mocking the simple words of love she had once exchanged with Osei. "Look at this," she wrote like a silly girl. "My love, take care at the market, come home early, I pray for you every night." How pathetic, she mocked, showing the camera. Deep down, Ojua wasn't just laughing at the letters, she was laughing at the whole woman, laughing at the story, the sacrifice, the purity she herself had never understood. Maina remembered when Ajua first arrived at the house, thin, scared, full of shame. She remembered preparing a hot bath, fresh food, a tidy room. She remembered the nights she heard her daughter-in-law cry and stood at the door, ready to open her arms. Now, all of that had turned into mockery. After hours of silent looting, Ajua began separating the pieces she wanted to take. She grabbed a large bag, stuffed in dresses, necklaces, scarves. She packed them like trophies, not like memories to be honored. Before leaving the room, She looked one last time at the sheet, where Mayna's body remained motionless. With a half smile, she shook her head and murmured, "Good thing she's gone. Now the house is ours." When she heard that, Mayna felt such a sharp pain in her chest that she thought she wouldn't survive this time. The sheet felt like it was glued to her skin, suffocating her soul. But she took a deep breath. It wasn't the time to reveal anything. Not yet. When Adjoa left, laughing, carrying the heavy bag on her back, Mayna cried in silence. She cried for every act of kindness that had become a joke. She cried for every sleepless night, for every prayer that now seemed lost to the wind. She cried, not because she had been deceived, but because she had believed so deeply in the goodness of someone who never knew what true love was. In that moment, she realized that sometimes loving is digging your own abyss, and that the love you give doesn't always come back. But she also understood that a soul that loves purely never stays empty, because dignity, even when betrayed, is never lost. And in that silent cry, Mayna began to feel the courage grow, a courage that would soon change everything. As the morning advanced, the house began to fill with sounds that had nothing to do with mourning. There were restrained laughs, hurried footsteps, low voices trembling more with excitement than with grief. In this coming and going, Mayna heard the bedroom door slam open. It was Adjoa, her daughter-in-law, Kojo's wife, who entered the room where Mayna's body lay covered by the white sheet. Adjoa had always been a woman with a loud laugh, firm steps, and eyes that scanned everything as if appraising the value of each object. From the start, Mayna had welcomed her with an open heart. She remembered the times Adjoa came home tired, her legs swollen, and she would massage them with shea butter, whispering prayers for God to bless that union. She remembered the meals she prepared just for her, the beautiful fabric she saved to sew a dress when she heard about the pregnancy. But none of that seemed to have taken root in a DJOA. In the bedroom, Adjoa began opening the wardrobe. She ran her hands over Mayna's clothes as if picking fruit at the market, shoved the drawers roughly, pulled out the boxes from under the bed. From time to time, she let out a laugh that echoed through the halls. "Look at this, everyone," she said, laughing into her phone camera. "Looks like an old village grandma's clothes. Such rags." In the little room, Mayna felt her blood freeze. The sheet covering her seemed to weigh tons. Each word from Adjoa was a whip. But Adjoa wasn't content just to look. She began trying on the dresses. She twirled in front of the mirror, striking poses, showing everything to her friends. On a video call, "Look, look, now I'm the queen of the house," she screamed, holding up an old necklace that Mayna had cherished so dearly. That necklace had been a gift from Mayna's mother, passed down through generations. It was more than jewelry. It was a root, a story, a silent prayer. Adjoa put it around her neck and laughed out loud. "Now this has a real owner. The old hag won't get in the way anymore," she said, adjusting the necklace on her chest. On the other end of the call, her friends laughed, clapped, made jokes. Mayuna bit her fist to keep from screaming. The salt of her tears burned her eyes, but she held on. There, in the dark, she remembered the nights she stayed up waiting for Adjoa to return from outings, worried, praying she'd get home safe. She remembered when Adjoa cried after being humiliated by her own mother, and she, Mayna, opened her arms, gave her shelter, gave her a home, gave her a name. Now, Adjoa seemed like a child playing with dolls. She threw fabrics on the floor, rummaged through perfumes, opened little boxes of keepsakes as if they were trash. "This is worthless, all old-fashioned, all tacky," she said, kicking aside a pair of sandals that Mayna had saved since her wedding. Adjoa paused for a moment in front of an old photograph. It was a young Mayna next to Ose, at their first harvest festival. In the photo, she smiled, her eyes full of hope. Ojo held the photo with disgust, analyzed it, curled her lip. "Such a boring old woman. I don't know how they put up with her for so long," she murmured. Then she tossed the photo on the bed carelessly, as if it were a dirty piece of paper. In the little room, Mayna whispered prayers. She asked God to hold her heart, to not let her soul break completely. Between one whisper and another, she remembered her mother's words, "Those who don't know how to be grateful lose even what they have." But there, facing raw ingratitude, Mayna saw that Adjoa had already lost everything before she even gained anything. She had lost her soul, her honor, her memory. Adjoa continued her silent party in the room. She tried on necklaces, bracelets, long dresses. Each piece was an excuse for more laughter, more jokes, more cruel comments. When she found a box of old letters, the ones Maina had kept like tiny treasures, she started reading them out loud, mocking the simple words of love she had once exchanged with Ase. "Look at this," she wrote like a silly girl. "My love, take care at the market. Come home early. I pray for you every night." "How pathetic," she mocked, showing the camera. Deep down, Ijoa wasn't just laughing at the letters. She was laughing at the whole woman, laughing at the story, the sacrifice, the purity she herself had never understood. Maina remembered when Ijoa first arrived at the house, thin, scared, full of shame. She remembered preparing a hot bath, fresh food, a tidy room. She remembered the nights she heard her daughter-in-law cry and stood at the door, ready to open her arms. Now, all of that had turned into mockery. After hours of silent looting, Ijoa began separating the pieces she wanted to take. She grabbed a large bag, stuffed in dresses, necklaces, scarves. She packed them like trophies, not like memories to be honored. Before leaving the room, she looked one last time at the sheet where Maina's body remained motionless. With a half smile, she shook her head and murmured, "Good thing she's gone. Now the house is ours." When she heard that, Maina felt such a sharp pain in her chest that she thought she wouldn't survive this time. The sheet felt like it was glued to her skin, suffocating her soul. But she took a deep breath. It wasn't the time to reveal anything. Not yet. When Ijoa left, laughing, carrying the heavy bag on her back, Maina cried in silence. She cried for every act of kindness that had become a joke. She cried for every sleepless night, for every prayer that now seemed lost to the wind. She cried, not because she had been deceived, but because she had believed so deeply in the goodness of someone who never knew what true love was. In that moment, she realized that sometimes loving is digging your own abyss, and that the love you give doesn't always come back. But she also understood that a soul that loves purely never stays empty, because dignity, even when betrayed, is never lost. And in that silent cry, Maina began to feel the courage grow, a courage that would soon change everything. The afternoon arrived heavy with a thick heat, the kind that makes the walls sweat and the air stand still. Inside the house, the silence had turned into a disguised noise. Dry laughs, hurried footsteps, the sound of objects being moved, furniture being dragged. Every corner seemed to vibrate with a strange, almost dark energy. But in the middle of that whirlwind of vanity and ambition, a sweet sound broke through the house, like the song of a lost bird. It was the gentle voice of Kofi, Maina's grandson, a 7-year-old boy who carried the purity of a clear sky in his eyes. Kofi entered holding an old toy, one Mana had fixed many times with thread and patience. He walked slowly, looking around, confused. He passed through the living room and looked at his grandfather, who didn't even notice him. Then he saw his Aunt Essie rummaging through bags, saw Ijoa picking out which belongings to take. But no one stopped to look at him. No one knelt down to explain what was happening. When Kofi got near the room where the body lay, covered by the white sheet, he stopped. The toy fell to the floor. His eyes immediately filled with tears. It was as if his pure, clean soul could feel the injustice before understanding it. He stood still, his lips trembling, his breathing short. "Grandma," he called softly, as if afraid to wake someone sleeping. Silence answered. Then he stepped closer, placed his small hand on the sheet, and began to cry. Back in the little room, Maina heard everything. Each sob was a heartbeat inside her chest. Then Kofi, his voice breaking, asked the question that ripped through the entire house. "Will Grandma come back from heaven tomorrow?" The question came out pure, without malice, carrying only longing and hope. It was as if someone had screamed in the middle of the darkest night. His father, Kojo, appeared behind him, irritated, holding his phone. He pulled the boy's arm roughly. "Shut up, boy. She's never coming back," he shouted. The shout echoed off the walls, made Kofi's toy bounce on the floor. The boy tried to resist, crying loudly, reaching his arm back toward the room. "I want Grandma. I want Grandma," he screamed as if pulling a root from the earth. Kojo, furious, dragged his son away, trying to silence the cries. At that moment, Maina felt her heart shatter into pieces. Every cry from her grandson was a direct call to heaven, a prayer without words, a longing so true that no wealth in the world could erase it. She remembered the afternoons teaching Kofi to pray before bed, the made-up stories to make him laugh, the fruits picked from the yard just to please him. The grandson was the only one who saw Maina as she truly was, a heart-beating pure love. The boy managed to break free for a moment, ran back into the room, and hugged the sheet tightly. His tears soaked the fabric, and his small voice tangled in sobs. "I promise to be good, Grandma. I promise I won't break the plates anymore. I promise I won't run in the hallway. Come back, please, come back." Kojo came running, pulled the boy again, this time even harder. The boy almost fell. Mana, hidden, covered her face. She couldn't hold it anymore. The tears flowed uncontrollably. Her pain mixed with her grandson's pain, as if they were a single torn soul. As Kojo dragged Kofi away, the boy's voice still echoed, "Grandma, I love you. Grandma, don't leave me." It was a pure cry, so loud it seemed to pierce the ceiling, rise to the sky, break through the clouds. In the little room, Maina clutched her rosary. She felt the cold beads, each one squeezed so hard, it seemed to carve the memory of that pure love into her bones. The grandson was the last living flame amid the darkness. He was the last seed planted in a field that seemed lost. The sound of the door slamming cut through the moment. Kojo, embarrassed, locked Kofi in his room, muffling his cries with loud music in the hallway. Silence returned, but it was a heavy, dirty silence, full of shame. Maina understood that even in a field of thorns, a flower always blooms. Kofi's love was that flower. His question, "Will Grandma come back from heaven tomorrow?" was more than a child's plea. It was the only true lament in that house full of ambition. Maina pressed the rosary to her chest, closed her eyes, and let the tears stream down her face. In that moment, she promised herself she wouldn't leave the boy alone in that plantation of selfishness. Even if she lost everything, she would not lose his purity. She wouldn't let the seed wither in that small heart. There was still a living home. And there, in that silent moment, a decision was born. Because those who can love without asking for anything in return deserve to be protected. And Maina, even betrayed, even scorned, knew that true love, once planted, never dies. It waits, and in the right time, it blooms. The afternoon heat had already begun to soften the clay ground in the yard when Osei came out of the bedroom, carefully combing what little hair he had left and spraying cheap perfume on his neck. He wore a light-colored shirt, the same one he used to wear to village parties, to celebrations where Maina would spend hours preparing food for the whole neighborhood while he showed off among his friends, telling stories and smiling wide. But that day, the smile was different. It wasn't a smile of shared joy. It was the smile of someone who thinks they've won a battle, without realizing a bigger war is approaching. Osei walked through the house with confident steps, as if he already owned everything completely. He passed the living room and saw Essie, sitting with a sheet of paper in her hand, writing a list of household items. "These old paintings, I'm going to burn them. I don't want anything that reminds me of the old woman," she said without looking up. Osei let out a low chuckle, that kind of laugh that comes from the throat, without soul. "Tomorrow I'll take those photos off the walls. Enough of those sad faces, all wrapped in cloth and prayers. This house is going to have a new life," he answered. Meanwhile, Kojo spoke on the phone with barely contained excitement. "I'm already closing with the agent. I don't want to drag this out here. The money will come fast. The important thing is to move forward." Hearing this, Osei puffed out his chest. He felt like a king preparing the throne for the new queen. He walked to the gate and, holding his phone, started to dial. Soon, the voice of his lover sounded softly on the other end. He smiled, looked at the sky, as if talking to an angel. "My love, tomorrow I'll introduce you to everyone. We'll throw a small party. No candles, no sadness. We'll mark this house with new joy. You'll be the lady of this house, as you always deserved." From the little room, Maina heard every word. Her body felt like stone. There was no more space for surprise, only a cold, deep pain that reached her bones. Osei kept going, excited. "I want everything ready. New flowers, special dishes. We'll show everyone that the past is gone. Life is too short for crying." His lover, on the other end, laughed. "I waited a long time, Osei. I'm ready. I want to wear that new dress, walk around this house without fear, sleep in the main bed. I'm going to tear out every scarf, every old candle, every saint. You'll have it all, my love," he assured her. "This house will be our new beginning. The old woman held back my life, dimmed my light. Now I'm free. Maina, clinging to her rosary, remembered the nights she stayed up waiting for Usei to come back from his wanderings. She remembered the smell of alcohol, the empty stares, the poorly sewn excuses. She always forgave him, always found a new prayer to hold him up. She believed love was patient, that marriage was a strong root. But there, listening to those words, she saw that everything was a facade, a stage. Issei went back inside and started rummaging through the shelf. He picked up the family portraits, ran his fingers over them, and one by one piled them in a corner. These memories are no good anymore. I want space for the new, he murmured. Esi appeared, holding a tray. Dad, tomorrow I'll fix everything. I already ordered white and lilac flowers. We'll decorate the hallway, the porch. It's going to be a spectacle. This house will smell like new life. Issei smiled. Exactly. No old memories. No soap smell. No chicken broth smell. No prayers from the old woman. I want a modern home. Fresh, full of joy. Kojo came back to the living room, stuffing documents into an envelope. Dad, I'm going to the notary tomorrow. If you want to settle everything on the same day, even better. Then we start the new phase with no loose ends. The conversation flowed like a dirty river, full of mud and trash. No one spoke of the woman who once cared for every brick in that house. No one mentioned the night's manner spent sewing in silence, sweat dripping onto the floor. None of them remembered the baskets of fruit left at the neighbors' doors, the songs that rocked them to sleep, the smell of basil in the beans. In the little room, Maina no longer cried. The tears had dried up, turned into a silence that burned. From the inside, what remained was a sharp clarity, a cold certainty. She wasn't remembered, wasn't respected, wasn't loved. To them, she was just an obstacle, finally removed from the way. In the corner of the little room, among extinguished candles and damp sheets, Miana rose slightly. Her pain-marked face looked firmer, because even when the soul shatters, there is still a seed of strength, a seed that sprouts in silence, in darkness, in betrayal. While Issei planned the party, while Essie and Kojo counted imaginary bills, Maina remembered every sacrifice. Every renunciation was a stone she carried. And now, that burden began to transform into something else. It wasn't revenge, it was dignity. In her mind, a phrase her mother used to say appeared. The river may change its course, but it always returns to its source. And in that moment, Maina understood. The party would happen, the walls would be cleaned, the photos would be burned. But the love she had planted, the seeds she had scattered, no one would ever uproot. Issei could fill the house with lilac flowers. The lover could wear the finest silk. The children could sell every meter of land. But one day, each of them would feel the weight of having turned their backs on the woman who was their foundation. And in that silence, Miana was getting ready. The dawn would bring more than a new day. It would bring the truth. And that truth couldn't be bought, couldn't be sold, couldn't be hidden. It would be born raw, like the sun that burns the eyes of those who spend too long in the shadows. The sky began to dress in deep purple, the first timid stars appearing like small beacons, lighting up a silence that seemed to swallow everything. Inside the house, the movement had stopped. Essie gathered the last bags, Kojo locked himself in his room, and Issei stayed in the kitchen, preparing his last drink before bed. The sound of the glass hitting the table echoed like a hammer blow in Maina's chest. When the footsteps finally faded, only the sound of crickets outside remained, along with the rustling of banana leaves swaying in the warm breeze. Maina's little room smelled of dust and longing. It was there that she kept memories no one else saw, yellowed newspaper clippings with recipes she never had time to try, faded letters from distant relatives, her eldest son's first sandals, and the rosary that had been with her since she was a girl. Maina sat on the cold floor, clutching the rosary with both hands. The beads felt heavier than ever. Each bead was a sigh, a memory, a pain sewn into her skin. Sweat ran down her neck, her chest heaved as if there wasn't enough air in the whole world. There, in the deepest silence, she began to pray. Not a memorized prayer, not a repeated psalm, but a sincere conversation, straight from her soul. My God, it was me who stitched every seam of this house. It was me who rose each morning under the weight of the pot and the weight of faith. It was me who woke up first, slept last, prayed even for the soul of those who spat on my plate. It was me who held every fever, who listened to every lie with ears full of hope. And now, my God, Here I am, alone. The tears came, hot and abundant. They fell onto the clay floor like raindrops no one hears. Mina remembered every morning she looked at her tired face in the mirror. Every time she swallowed her tears so as not to worry the children. Every forced smile at breakfast. She recalled the pots washed under moonlight, the clothes wrung until her arms ached, the sacrifices made in silence as if offering flowers to an invisible altar. Her body trembled. Every muscle seemed to want to leave her skin, to escape that suffocating room. But she stayed. She stayed because she knew that, on that night, she had to face each memory like looking into the eyes of an old enemy. Amid her prayers, she began to remember the small joys no one saw. Kofi's smile when she shared her last banana, the song she hummed while sweeping the yard, the afternoons she sat alone on the doorstep watching the sunset. Small flashes of life that now seemed as distant as the stars. In the middle of this vigil, Mina picked up a piece of fabric and began to sew. Without thinking, her fingers moved on their own, as if trying to prove that there was still life there. Each stitch was an unspoken word. Each thread was a piece of pain sewn back into her heart. She murmured, "I lived for them. I bled for them. I disappeared for them." The voice came out hoarse, almost unrecognizable. She remembered the last time she looked in the mirror before pretending to die. The aged face, the sunken eyes, the white hairs showing without mercy. There, she wasn't just a woman. She was the portrait of all the accumulated sacrifices, all the sleepless nights, all the wounds swallowed in silence. The wind entered through a crack in the window, lifting the old veil that covered a makeshift altar. The candles were worn down, some broken, but still there, like her, still there, even after everything. In that moment, a strange calm took over the room. It wasn't peace, but a bitter acceptance. Mina understood that death doesn't begin when the heart stops. It begins when no one sees us anymore, when the voice has no echo, when the embrace is no longer remembered. She decided there, sitting on the cold floor, with the rosary pressed to her hands, that she would not return to that house as the woman they all ignored. She would no longer be the doormat, no longer the step they used to climb higher. At dawn, Mina wouldn't carry just her tired body, but a living truth, a courage no one imagined still existed in her. The night dragged on, each minute feeling like a year, but in the end, when the sky began to brighten, Mina slowly got up. Her legs trembled, but they were steady. She wiped her face, cleaned the trace of tears. She looked at the rosary one last time and whispered, "Thank you for holding my soul tonight." Outside, the roosters began to crow, announcing a new day. A day with no more masks, no more sheets, no more lies. A day when Mana, even shattered, would rise whole, because in her soul, despite all the abandonment, something still pulsed that none of them could buy or sell. Dignity. And that dignity, silent like the last thread of light on the darkest night, was now her only armor. The sky began to lighten like a freshly washed sheet hung on the line, slowly gaining color with the first rays of sunlight. The yard, still damp from the night dew, held a heavy silence, as if it too knew what was about to happen. Inside the house, Osei snored loudly. Kojo slept hugging his papers and promises of wealth. Essie dreamed of parties and new decorations, and Ojo had turned in bed, tired from so much future planning. In her small room, Mina stood, her face washed, hair tied back anyhow, her body still heavy, but her gaze firm like a rock that had weathered many storms. She held her rosary, now not as a plea for help, but as a memory of every night she had once believed. She opened the door. Slowly, the creak sounded like thunder in the midnight silence. Mina paused at the doorway, took a deep breath, and then walked toward the living room. Each step echoed on the cold tiles, announcing the arrival of someone everyone believed had already left forever. Reaching the living room, she stopped in front of the wall where the frames were piled up, ready to be burned. She saw the frames, the faces frozen in false smiles, and felt a chill. In the corner, an empty chair where she had often sat to sew in silence, waiting to hear a thank you that never came. Osei was the first to wake to the sound of footsteps. He came out of the bedroom, still groggy, rubbing his eyes. When he saw Mina standing in the middle of the room, the glass he was holding fell to the floor, shattering into pieces. The noise woke Essie and Kojo, who came running. Ajoa appeared shortly after, clutching a scarf, her face still swollen with sleep. For a moment, no one said a word. The silence was so deep it seemed to swallow all the sins of that house. Mana's eyes roamed across each face, as if seeing them for the first time. She didn't scream, didn't run, didn't throw anything. She just took a deep breath, lifted her chin, and said, in a steady voice, heavy with centuries of pain, "I died long before I lay under that sheet." The words hung in the air, as if no one knew how to react. Kojo, pale, stepped back. Essie dropped the paper she was holding. Ajo let the scarf slip from her hands, the stolen necklace clattering to the floor with a dry sound. Ace tried to stammer something. Maina, we ... But his voice died before it was born. She looked straight at him, her eyes burning, not with rage, but with a truth no one could deny. I was the root, I was the ground, I was the fire in the cold and the water in thirst, and yet I died in your eyes every single day. The silence broke into muffled sobs. Essie began to cry, but Maina didn't even look at her. Kojo leaned against the wall, his face buried in his hands. Ojoa trembled, clutching the necklace like a burden. Ose, standing in the middle of the room, seemed to age in seconds. Mana turned toward the hallway, and, for the first time since pretending her death, felt her feet firm on the ground. She passed by her children without touching them, like someone walking past ghosts. Dotting Kofi's room, she found the boy awake, sitting at the edge of the bed, his eyes swollen from crying. When he saw her, Kofi ran, throwing himself into her arms. With a muffled cry, "Grandma!" she hugged him with all the strength she had left. She ran her hand through his hair, kissed his forehead, breathed in his child's scent that reminded her of happy mornings. "You are the only living soul in this house," she whispered softly, as if it were a secret just for the two of them. Meanwhile, in the living room, the others remained frozen. Shame trickled through the corners like rainwater seeping into a neglected house. Each one felt the weight of their loveless choices. Maina returned to the living room with Kofi by her side, holding his hand tightly. Before leaving, she looked once more at the house. Her eyes swept every corner, the kitchen where she stirred pots with love, the hallway where she sang softly to calm the children, the yard where she planted flowers no one ever watered. She took a deep breath, squeezed Kofi's hand even tighter, and said without needing to shout, "You sold everything. You sold memory, sold faith, even sold the smell of my coffee. But my dignity, that you can't buy, not with the whole world." Asa tried to step forward, but his body wouldn't move. Essie fell to her knees, mumbling words no one could understand. Kojo couldn't look her in the eyes. Ajua turned, her face away, the necklace clattering to the floor again. Without another word, Maina walked out. The morning wind hit her face like a blessing, a breath of new life. The sky, now completely clear, seemed to smile at her. At the gate, she paused, looked back one last time, and in the silence of her soul, promised herself never to return. Because in that moment, she understood that dying wasn't about closing your eyes, it was living without being remembered with love. And in that same instant, Maina was reborn, a whole woman, even if broken, a free woman, even if wounded, a woman who, despite everything, still knew how to hold love in the palm of her hand. And with Kofi by her side, Maina took the first step out, toward a new dawn that carried no ghosts, only the truth, the bitter yet purifying truth, like the dew that washes the leaves at the break of day. The dirt path seemed longer that morning, as if each step was a deep dive into her own soul. The sun rose shyly, stretching its rays lazily between the trees, and the birdsong mixed with the muffled sound of the first pots clinking in the neighbors' houses. Maina held Kofi's hand firmly. The boy walked beside her with small but determined steps, staring at the ground as if still carrying the pain of what he had heard the night before. As they walked, Maina felt the weight of decades sliding off her shoulders, one by one. Each painful memory fell like dry leaves along the path. The weight of abandonment, the silence of humiliation, the bitterness of betrayal, all left behind, mixed into the dust, rising with each step. They reached the gate of Kwabena, the faithful old neighbor. The gate creaked, old but holding the dignity of someone who never forgot the value of another's soul. Kwabena sat in his straw chair, holding a steaming cup of tea. When he saw Maina, he dropped the cup so quickly that the tea spilled all over the ground. He stood up, eyes filled with tears, and ran to her. "You're alive, ... Thank God," he murmured, gripping her hands like holding a miracle. Maina looked at him with tenderness. There, in those eyes full of truth, she found the only embrace the world still owed her. Kwabinar didn't ask anything. He demanded no explanation. He simply opened the gate and led Maina and Kofi to a small room in the back. Simple but clean. Here you have a place. Here you have respect. Here you're remembered, even when you're not here. Maina looked around. The room was small. The wooden bed creaked. The ceiling had old stains. But there, in that simplicity, there was more warmth than in the entire house she had built with so much sacrifice. The boy looked at her, eyes still full of tears, but now with a new glow. "Can I stay here with you, Grandma?" he asked softly. She hugged him, pressed his head to her chest. "Here, my child. No one will tell you to be quiet. Here, your cry is heard. Here, your love is root." Back at the old house, neighbors began to whisper. Some said Maina had come back from the dead. Others claimed it was divine punishment, that those who forget their mother forget their own soul. Ase, Essie, Kojo, and Ojo found themselves surrounded by sharp, cutting stares and whispered curses. The respect they wanted to sell disappeared like water under a scorching sun. Kwabena spread the truth through the village. She didn't die. You all killed her soul day after day. But God is great. He never sleeps. And so, at every corner, a phrase started to echo, soon turning into a chant. She died for them, but was reborn for herself. The children, now marked, felt the ground vanish beneath their feet. Ase couldn't find peace, not even in his last sip of liquor. Essie was avoided by the neighborhood women. Kojo failed to sell the land, and Ajo was seen burning Maina's clothes in secret, trying to bury her own shame. In the village square, Maina began to sit every day with Kofi. She carried a low stool, covered with a floral cloth. Kofi would sit on her lap, arms wrapped around her neck, face hidden against her chest. There, among the laughter of children and the smell of fried food from the stalls, she found her own soul again. People passing by would stop and greet her respectfully. Some came closer to hear her stories. Others simply sat nearby in silence, finding peace just being close to her. One day, sitting with Kofi on her lap, Maina looked at the horizon, her face glowing in the sunset light. She slowly ran her hand through his hair, took a deep breath, and said almost in a whisper, but loud enough for the boy to keep forever in his heart, "Dying isn't closing your eyes. Dying is not being remembered with love." Kofi lifted his face, looked at her with big eyes full of sunlight. He smiled, as if understanding life in a way only children and those who have suffered deeply can understand. And there, in that simple square, Maina knew there was still life to live. Not with those who despised her soul, but with the one who carried within him the last thread of purity, the last song of truth. As the sky turned pink and orange, Maina felt her heart beat free, whole, because, in the end, those who plant love harvest strong roots, and even when everything seems dry, a single breath of truth is enough to bloom again. There, sitting with Kofi, she was no longer the ignored woman, the voiceless shadow. She was a whole woman, mother, grandmother, root, and finally, free.